Good morning, everyone. Our topic today is around Canada's entrepreneurial ambition. We just heard Harley's incredible story and entrepreneurial success. And one of my key questions is, how do we get more of Harley in this country? With that, we don't have to go very far with these incredible panelists that we have sitting next to us today. We'll find out a little bit more about each of them in the next 45 minutes and really try to understand what lessons have they learned that can help move our country in the right direction. I would like to start with you, Jacques. For those of you who don't know Jacques Bernier and his firm Teralys Capital, you should. Teralys Capital is one of the largest fund of funds in Canada. They have $1.6 billion under management. What's really unique about this fund is that 100% of their portfolio is dedicated to innovation, which compared to other fund of funds in Canada and elsewhere in the world, usually it's just a minor portion of other venture, it's usually a very minor portion of other venture portfolios. He has been a technology entrepreneur for the last 25 years, so it's really an entrepreneur building a fund of funds for other entrepreneurs. He's known to take buses when he travels, and the most important thing is he's also known to box the hell out of some of his portfolio company CEOs. So with that, Jacques, I would love for you to share with us, why did you feel the need to start a fund of funds like Teralys, and what do you see is the current, where have we come in the last 10 years in Canada as it relates to the state of entrepreneurship, and where do you see this going?
Well, a real pleasure to meet you today. Let's start with why I started Teralys and what I've been doing for the last decade. In fact, and I would take some of your words of earlier, in the past, we were looking at Canada's resources, and I thought that in no way I would raise my daughter in a Canada where her future was going through natural resources and Walmarts, and decided that I would stop being an entrepreneur. I had been a successful entrepreneur for 25 years, and I would move to the dark side of the force and fund the companies, and trying to change the ecosystem that we had in Canada, which was very, very, very young 10 years ago. The number of professional investors in venture capital was very limited. A lot of them didn't have the right expertise, in fact. So we wanted to change that, to learn from the best, to learn from California VC, to learn from Israel, from the different places that have been around for a longer time. So that's when I launched Teralys. Now, as Ruma mentioned, we manage $1.6 billion. It's only in IT, biotech, and clean tech in every sector. It represents something like a couple hundred companies in Canada. It represents something like 14,000 employees and $2.5 billion of revenues last year, and revenues that are doing this every year.
That's amazing. Now, are you invested in every VC fund in Canada?
Well, I wouldn't say every VC fund, but every VC fund that matter.
So when we talk about our ambitions in Canada, where do you see entrepreneurs and venture capitalists on a daily basis? You are talking to businesses and government. Where do you see our ambitions being?
Well, it's changing. It's changing dramatically, and these people are the best example we have around to prove that. But let's say that when I started, well, I was raised a Catholic. So being an entrepreneur didn't sound good to my mother. She thought I would be going to hell. And that, I think, culture is part of what we've been doing. And sometimes I see too many entrepreneurs that are looking for the 3 Bs. They're looking for the BMW, the beach house, and the boat.
I don't have any of those things. Just gonna put that out there.
Yeah,
but you're aiming for the global airplane. And that's that part of ambition which is changing. There's not enough. There's a huge change that happened over the last 30 years, but it's still not what it should be.
So what do we need to do in order to get there? you're saying that we've evolved there, but what are some concrete things we can do in order to help move that in that direction?
Well,
How do we get more of Michele and Harley here?
they have to reproduce. So you have to reproduce.
If you didn't hear that, he said they need to reproduce.
Not together, just in general, I think he means, yeah. I just want to be clear here. My wife would have a real problem with that.
So would Andrew.
More seriously, money is an important part of it. We have access to money. It's a commodity, as Harley mentioned. So money is available now. There's a change in the ecosystem of venture investment. There's a change in the entrepreneurs, but the main thing is we have to change that view. So the best people to do that are the media, but are mainly our representative, our prime minister, and that's what he's been doing. In one sentence last year, well, this year at Davos, he summarized it perfectly, which was, my predecessor wanted you to think of Canada as resources. I want you to think of Canada as resourcefulness. Yeah. This is changing the mindset of entrepreneurs. It's good to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to be a rock star being an entrepreneur. Yeah. And that will change the ambition, the way people will drive themselves.
Great. Well, speaking of rock stars, I'll move on to Michele here, who, whenever I hear Michele's story, it makes me believe that anything is possible. I mean, she sold her 4th startup on her 29th birthday. But by the time she was 16, it was really evident that her entrepreneurial genes and her penchant for success was going to be there for the rest of her life. She in high school at 16 organized the first blood drive in Calgary. Then when she went to university at Queen's, she started the first sustainable cafe tea room. Then from there, she decided to start a fishery, which she funded by winning business plan competitions across North America. And from there, she ended up starting and selling 2 other businesses. Since then, she has become the youngest dragon on Dragon's Den, which we're all very proud of. You're on the board of Vail, and in her spare time, she runs marathons. So Michele, given you're a serial entrepreneur, you've raised a lot of capital, either from angel investors, from institutional investors. Tell us what your experience was the first time you tried to raise money in Canada.
So I think this is a really good time. First of all, when you listen to my bio, I sound more crazy than highly intelligent. But, things have changed a lot in the last 10 years. And so when I started the tea room, I was raising money from the university and trying to cobble together little pieces. And for the fish business, we ended up winning business plan competitions because really at that time there was the word accelerator didn't exist, the word incubator didn't exist, there was no early stage funds. I remember we met with maybe 1 or 2 people. They told us we were fully crazy, which was probably accurate. But we said, no, we're going to go build this anyway. And so I ended up building the fishing business and all of Buytopia being bootstrapped, and SnapSaves. We didn't raise any money for any of those businesses. And I think today I see it so differently for early stage entrepreneurs. Today you can have, shared office space, and you can meet other people that are as crazy as you that can really help you grow. Today there are, these grant programs and incubators that allow you to really get, that first 3 months of traction off the ground, because that's where the magic really happens. It's can you get that early product working, and can you do that? And then from there, I think it's still more challenging to raise money in Canada than the US, but now it's much easier to also raise money from both places.
So can you sort of share any anecdotes? You've heard Jacques talk about how we need to evolve the venture capital side of our ecosystem. Can you tell us from an entrepreneur standpoint, when you started Buytopia, how was it raising money? And then I'd like you to compare that to raising money today with your latest startup.
So it's never a fair comparison, because as you get to be a better entrepreneur, your options for capital get better and better because more people have trust that you can do this. But I think that I remember what it was like fundraising. We were fundraising for Buytopia, or trying to fundraise in 2011, and deals were were very aggressive. I mean, deals where, if we give you $500,000, we're going to take half of your company, and it's going to be, pretty difficult for you to ever squeeze enough equity out of this for yourself to really grow. And I think that's fundamentally changed. I still have a story of when we were raising money for SnapSaves of a fund where we brought a Canadian fund. We got 2 term sheets from the U.S. We said, look, we're doing a $5 million Series A. We have this term sheet right here, and the Canadian fund says you should really take our $500,000 at a totally different valuation. And I said, as much as I love Canada, that doesn't make sense for me to do. And so I think that, look, everyone, the folks that run funds need to get great returns and to get great deals, but it's also really important that entrepreneurs kind of know how to raise capital from everywhere, so that they are getting the best deals to finance their companies, so we can grow companies that are the size of Shopify, not the kind of companies that cap out or maybe like me sold a little bit too early.
Yeah. So I want to follow up on that. So you heard Jacques talk about the 3 Bs, which I think alludes to the fact that in Canada we tend to sell our companies too early, which do you think you sold SnapSaves too early?
So when you sell a company, it is probably the most intensely personal decision you're ever going to make. And it's impossible for us to create government policy around when you should sell or when you shouldn't sell, because it really depends on the team and the founders and all sorts of things. But now, once you walk away from being in the madness of that life every day, I think there's many days that, I said, well, we really had something here. And I think that if we would have had a couple different financing options, it would have been a lot easier at the time to say, like, let's keep going and keep building this on our own.
Great. So those are some really key lessons. Harley, so
I have a lot to say right now.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm dying here.
So
I'm just like jumping out of my skin.
No, please jump, but jump. So you've gone from DJ to T-shirt maker to Shopify. We just heard your incredible story. How do we get more people like you in this country?
I don't know. I don't know how to. I mean, okay. A couple things I want to be very clear about. So I was born and raised in Canada. I'm a proud Canadian entrepreneur. I will live hopefully in Ottawa the rest of my life. But I went to high school in the States, and Toby grew up in Germany. And so I was just listening to Michele's story a little bit around the idea of fundraising. And so when we went to fundraise in 2010 on our Series A at Shopify, we didn't look for the Canadian fund or the Ottawa fund. We looked for the best fund possible given our business model. And that happened to be Bessemer Venture Partners in New York City. We've always sort of taken, I think, a different approach to building our business. Shopify is a global business. We happen to be based in Canada. We're proud to be a Canadian company, but we're a global, but we have merchants in 150 countries. And I think that attitude, because both of us have had international experience in our childhood or in our formative years, we always kind of looked at it in that way. That's the first thing. So the second thing I would say is, I talked about going to law school, and I also have an MBA. I didn't do any of those things to become a professional. I didn't go to law school to become a lawyer. I went to law school to become a better entrepreneur. I did my MBA not to get a job at McKinsey, with all due respect to all the McKinsey people in the room. I did my MBA to be a better entrepreneur. And I think that the idea, like my mom and dad always encouraged this entrepreneurialness. The reason that my dad gave me $1,000 when I was 13 years old to buy DJ equipment wasn't because he thought I was going to be a great DJ, was because he wanted to encourage me to be this entrepreneur that he knew that I already was. And so I think as I now have a 4-month-old, it's our first child, and I didn't sleep well last night, so if I'm a little bit tired today, you can tell why. But I think that we as parents, we need to encourage this. And you made a great comment about the connotation of an entrepreneur. My wonderful, 85-year-old Jewish grandmother is still disappointed I'm not a lawyer anymore. Because in her mind, she wants her grandson to be a lawyer. That was something that was prestigious in her day.
Right?
That was success for her. And so I think we need to change the connotation. The other thing I want to point out is, if you look at all the barriers of entry to starting a business, so let's say you want to start a water bottle company. So the first thing you may have to do is maybe you don't need to raise a lot of money, maybe you need a little bit of seed capital. Well, now you can go to angel investors, and many of us have become angel investors recently, and I love seeing this paid-forward approach from successful Canadian entrepreneurs that are now becoming angel investors and paying it forward, and I love seeing Michele on all these cap tables that I'm investing in as a small-time angel. But you can also go to crowdfunding platforms, and you can easily raise $100,000 in Kickstarter or Indiegogo or one of these sort of things. Then let's say you need a prototype. I want to prototype this bottle. Well, 10 years ago, I would have to go to China or to Shenzhen, and I'd have to make some sort of mold and get some sort of sample. But now I can go to a local library and I can print out a sample on my own for $5 or $50. Third piece is, okay, now I want to distribute it. How do I get into the hands of consumers around the world? Well, 10 years ago or 1,000 years ago, I would have to convince a storekeep or a retailer to put it on the shelves, and that retailer would share the profit with me. Whereas now I can use software like Shopify, and I can sell it to a global audience, and I can keep the entire profit for myself. And so if you look at all the different pillars you need to start a business, every one of those has been reduced because of technology. So now we get to the second point, which is like, if everyone is doing it, how do we make sure it's done here? I think we have to celebrate more of the Michelles of the world. We have to celebrate more success. The one thing that I don't think we're doing nearly enough of, and Michele is right, like the whole concept of selling a company too early is a tricky one. I have friends that have sold companies, and it's very difficult for me to say to someone who I know, wants to take care of his family, don't sell your company for $50 million because I think you can build a $5 billion company. $50 million is going to change the lives of his great-grandchildren, right? It's going to be a game changer for him, and he or she may become an incredible investor one day. And so it's difficult for me to give that sort of feedback, but I believe that. I believe, we had a certain discipline with Shopify over the years where we did not return phone calls from corp dev departments of large Silicon Valley companies because we didn't want to have those conversations. We wanted to be the ones to buy those companies eventually. And so I think one of the things we just need to do better of is we need to celebrate more of the success. We need to raise the level of ambition. I recently told Michele this, but the week after we got back from the Shopify IPO Roadshow, Toby and I made a list of all the things we learned by taking the company public, both in the US and in Canada. It was a dual listing. And we distributed that to the 12 CEOs that we thought are most likely to go public soon. That collaboration, that cooperation, that collegiality that we all have with each other, the US does not have that. So we need to sort of take advantage of what we do have instead of worrying about the things that the US does better than us.
Great. So Harley, you're talking about the importance of celebrating entrepreneurs, the mindset, and I'm seeing your incredible ability to go out there and make things happen. Do you think there's, like, you also talked this morning about the importance of understanding failure. How can we teach that to our general population? Because I don't think as a whole and at scale, people think this way. So how do we create that shift?
I mean, maybe this is controversial, but I don't think the way we do that is by giving, like, I know a couple years ago there was an article in the paper about how, this new sort of kids soccer league, everybody's a winner and they don't keep score anymore. I'm not sure that's how we do it. I think that is cargo culting some other silliness. I think one of the ways we do it is, I mean, this venue was about me talking about some success in Canadian innovation, but a lot of what I do is talk about my failures, right? I had a couple t-shirt businesses that did well. I had a DJ company that did well. I've had dozens of other companies that have been complete failures. The good news is that the cost of failure was trending towards zero when I was building them. And so it didn't matter that my slipper company didn't work out. I had a nurse uniform company that was a disaster. It was the silliest company in the world. I thought nurses wanted to have really cool, funky nurse uniforms. Turns out they don't. They want regular nurse uniforms. It was a huge failure, and that's okay. And so as much as possible, we need to talk about our failures as much as we do talk about the successes. The interesting part about it is it takes a certain level of courage and a certain level of self-confidence to talk about failures. And often that self-confidence comes forward after you've had success, right? So I think it behooves the business community, entrepreneurs in Canada who have done well, but also ones that haven't necessarily done well, to tell those stories. And I've made myself available in a very public way to help any entrepreneur in Canada with whatever they're going through. But I gotta say, like, the pay it forward thing is not to be dismissed. The fact, like, in 2016, when some new company, Kira Medical, this amazing company out of Toronto that allows you to access a doctor from your, to have a doctor's appointment on your iPhone using FaceTime. When I saw this company, amazing company, I wanted to invest in it, and I got the cap table, and it was a bunch of great other Canadian startup entrepreneurs, and we weren't investing a lot of money. We were all putting in $15,000 or $10,000 or $25,000. In 2010, that did not exist. The people that had made money in previous generations, I felt, had their money in the mattress, whereas now, most of us are paying it forward.
Yeah, because ultimately, it's like you need Harley's advice on how to get, this thing done, or how to, if you have founders on that cap table, those are kind of your best calls, your best resources, and there really is an environment that we're starting to grow around that, because we're seeing it, through these like angel networks. I mean, it's worked really well in BC. One of the things that I think was magical there was that, Ryan and there was, 4 or 5 other guys who were super influential in just paying it forward, giving it back. It was partially because there was tax credits on angel investments that made it really attractive to do so. But that's where I also want to put my money. Like, I don't know a single thing about picking public stocks. I know a lot about how to pick and train an entrepreneur. And so that gives me the most amount of personal joy too, is to build that next thing. So I think that's a really important element here.
Excellent. Jacques, how do you feel about that from the investor side?
Well,
Do you see more and more of that?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So it's all a process where, as early mentioned, and you just mentioned, Michele, the fact that we have winners, they're coming back and have other people learning. This makes more winner. These are now people with money that can invest in companies, starting other companies, helping companies. At the same time, in the past, they were selling the companies at a small size, so small that only 1 or 2 person in that company was making a couple of $1 million. Not enough to create an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing more and more teams, not single entrepreneur, but teams that are getting more money from their exit. Not enough still the scale up that we're talking about, but much more money, so that you see that circle back in the ecosystem.
Yeah. So we've talked about the shift in mindset and the need to change popular culture as it relates to entrepreneurship. Let's move a little bit. I'd love to hear from you guys. Jacques, maybe you can start. What role do you think the government can play, if any at all, as it relates to building this ecosystem and building our ambitions around?
Well, if I take a quote of Reagan, he said that the 8 more dangerous words from government is, we're from the government and we're here to help. But more seriously, the government is doing many things that are helping today. I've been in this business of innovation for the last 37 years. Never heard so many conferences, speeches, roundtables on innovation than that we've been getting for the last year. So that's the first level. The second level is the asset class of venture capital. So more specifically, investing in IT, life science, clean tech. That asset class has been beaten for one reason. If you're too young, but late 90s. In the late 90s, there was something called the internet bubble. That internet bubble took a decade to get rid of. So all of the returns from the early 2000 to 2010, basically, were really bad returns, not in Canada, around the world. But Canada was beginning, so it was even worse, because you're starting at the gate and your first groups of investor is losing money. So the asset class was not really, really good. What the government can do is help attract the pension funds, the banks, the corporates, the different groups of investors back to this asset class. And I've got good news. Since the last decade, the track record of investor has been doing this. And now it's a profitable asset class. It's not known. So you need the government to push behind this to make people understand that it's time to be back at investing in the asset class.
Yeah.
So my feeling is, and I think a lot about this, I mean, I don't fully agree with President Reagan, but I would say that Shopify has been around for 10 years, and in the last 12 months, we've had more engagement with government, more conversations. I don't want to even call these consultations because it feels so bureaucratic and stuffy, but there was a problem with the way, with some changes that were being proposed for stock option taxation. We were able to sit down with the minister and talk that through of how Shopify would not be where it is today if that would be the case. We also had an issue that was resolved, luckily, yesterday. I'm so excited about this, around immigration for skilled workers. That came from a conversation at Shopify where we explained, look, you don't have to do anything, like, you can do whatever you want, but understand where we're coming from. And so there is a certain empathy, and there's a certain collaboration that is happening between the private sector and particularly I think the technology sector and government that my grandfather and father were never able to take advantage of. And all this has happened in the last 12 months. And so I'm not one to say, government's great and it's wonderful that often, but we have seen more commitment in the last 12 months than in the last 12 years. And again, we're not always going to agree on everything. There's certain things I'm sure that certain government ministers want that we don't want. But the fact that we're having this conversation is a game changer, because my peers running $3 billion companies in Silicon Valley do not have that relationship with their government. And I think that is one of our new competitive advantages.
And the mindset behind this is great.
Our other big success just from this week is that AngelList was able to launch in Canada, which was a big deal. So between immigration...
Maybe explain that a little bit.
Why don't you share why that's awesome. A big deal?
Yeah, so that means that regular investors can come in and join something that Harley and I would have invested in. So we say, we're opening up this part of a round, this company is raising $1 million, Michele and Harley put in this much, you can put money on top of that without these complicated rules that used to exist to have basically regular individuals invest along tech syndicates.
Yeah, it's democratizing, right? Like, the reason that I can invest in any company is because I'm an accredited investor. But my mom is not an accredited investor. So if she sees a company that she loves, an app she's using out of Quebec City, and she wants to invest, she couldn't have done that. Now she can. She can put in $100 or $5,000 or $10,000 into that. That democratizes fundraising.
And this is a big step, right? If you think about, the history of the world, we used to have all the money that lied in the hands of, private individuals, and then we moved into public markets, which allowed us to initially start sharing some of this wealth. And this is really allowing, regular people and everyone else to participate in the tech economy.
That's great. I mean, I want to, yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. Does Michele, can we move on and talk about what changes are necessary in the business community as it relates to entrepreneurs? What are you seeing? What do you think needs to be changed? What more involvement can we ask from them?
So I think that and Silicon Valley is a good model to steal kind of the best things they're doing and not take some of the bad things they're doing. I think, I would echo what Harley said. There's a really good ecosystem around entrepreneurs, and it's very now easy for me to work with, companies like Shopify. But what is missing, I think, is corporations being able to move quickly in Canada. And so I've done a lot of this where, with SnapSaves, our clients were the largest consumer packaged goods, so we would sell to Coca-Cola in Canada and Coca-Cola in the US. And there's no question that on almost every single account, every single time, the Canadians at 10 times less size would move slower. And that's a problem, because as an entrepreneur, you need to move quickly. You have limited runway, you have limited capital, and you're looking for the fastest acceleration. And so, there's nothing more frustrating than when I go to a Canadian company first. I am Canadian. I say, look, I want to bring you, let's do this. Let's launch something together. We'll make this super low risk. I'm going to build it all. You just have to help, push it out, or whatever partnership it is. And people are like, that's an awesome idea, Michele. We should do it in 2019. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be around in 2019. The world is going to look totally different. And Americans constantly are like, next week, we will follow up, we will tell you if there's a deal, we will get something done, and we'll get it done before Christmas.
So how do we change that in Canada?
I think you call it out. Michele and I were at this great conference, Go North conference that Google put on last week, and there was a question in the audience, and someone said, I have a startup, and I'm thinking of raising money, and I have some U.S. VCs interested, I have Canadian VCs interested. The U.S. VCs are willing to get things done, get a term sheet out, and get the process finalized in 3 weeks. The Canadian VCs are taking 3 months, and I'm like, then don't take money from the Canadian VCs. And by the way, give me the name of that Canadian VC, because I'm going to tweet about it.
Give it to me too.
Yeah, and so, right, so on our, this is now very public, so I feel I can say it now. On our Series B, which happened around 2011, we were raising a $15 million round. And Bessemer from New York was going to lead that round. We wanted, for CCPC reasons, to remain a Canadian-controlled private corporation, which has a lot of great benefits for Canadian companies. We wanted some Canadian money in as well to make sure that more than half the company was Canadian-owned. So we went to a bunch of Canadian investors, and we said, look, here's the term, here's the cap, here's exactly what's going to happen here. And by the way, Bessemer's going to lead it, here's the schedule. And one of them dragged their feet. And so we simply went with another one, and it didn't work out. On our Series C, we raised a $100 million round in 2013. We went back to that investor and we said, look, it didn't work out last time because of the pace. It was just too slow. If you can operate at this pace and you can keep up with the others, we'd love to have you in. And they absolutely did it. They sped everything up. It was much more efficient, much more effective. But part of what I'm trying to do, and I think a lot of us are trying to do, is we want to call out some of that behavior. Because I think there are great Canadian VCs. I think some of them are my close friends. I think there's great fund-to-funds that are putting great capital in. But we just need to speed things up. We need to be a little bit less risk adverse, and we need to bet faster and harder on Canadian companies.
I might say that it's not a question of risk. It's not that people don't want to take a risk. It's that they don't have the knowledge to value that risk. So some of the fund managers don't have a clue.
Right.
So in your sector, so if they don't have a clue, it's risky.
So we can educate them, but if they don't listen, then I'm going to call them out publicly.
Absolutely.
Because I think there is some value in shaming them.
Yep.
I do.
God bless you, Harley. So Jacques, how do we change that on the VC side? How do we bring in the mentorship? How do we bring in that deep expertise? I think it also speaks to talent, to your earlier point.
Well, 15 years ago, the VC industry in Canada was mainly managed by guys with MBAs that had read about it, knew how to do term sheets, knew how to make complex formula. That it didn't make sense, but complex formula. That has been changing. That has been changing for more entrepreneurial and investors who you're seeing, like the best and Merphilisis, your other investors, people that have been there and done that before. So the new VCs are entrepreneurs that have succeeded and now know the problem. And they know how Harley feels the first morning when he got a call from the bank manager telling him the pay is not going through in a week. So we've changed that kind of people. It's still a learning process. It's still something that you're growing, and they grow by their own mistakes.
But you see us moving in that direction.
Absolutely, and a good example of that is one of your investors, Georgian. Georgian didn't exist a decade ago. We created them.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Georgian?
Georgian, quick story, entrepreneur, sold his company to IBM. He was selling, his revenues were of 20 million, stayed there as CEO with Golden Handcuff to raise the sales to 100 million, left the company, stayed with IBM on the M&A group, left, created his fund, knew that he had no way in hell to raise money at that time. So what he did is what we all do as entrepreneurs. He took his own money, he took the money of his few of his friends, did a first deal, worked on that deal for a year, the company went up, then started to look at institutional investors. We came in, believing in his story, but the story was that in one niche, data analytics, they would be the best in North America. Not the best in Toronto or the best in Waterloo, the best.
Global.
Exactly.
And it was Georgian. It was Justin Lafayette who I called when I needed on the Series B. When the other investor was working too slow, I called Justin. He was an operator. He just sold his company. And I said, we want to get some Canadian money in. We like you. Can you get it done fast? And he did.
Yeah.
And because of that, he got the upside, the reward of the appreciation of Shopify stock.
Yeah.
And he deserves that.
Exactly.
So how do we create more Justins? How many are there in Canada today?
I mean, I think that goes back to the pay it forward. I don't want Michele to be a full-time VC, with all due respect, sir. I want her to build other great companies, but we need more
Agree
people.
with you.
Right? We need more operators that are transitioning into being investors, as opposed to consultants and MBAs that are becoming investors. I think you need a certain level of understanding of what an entrepreneur is going through to be a great investor, and so I think we should encourage more of that.
So Michele, I think you have stories on both sides, challenges and successes that you've had with investors. Tell us a successful story of one of your investors who really helped you sell your company and take it to the next level.
The best thing, and it really goes back to what Harley said earlier, the best thing that an investor can do is tell you that your feelings are normal. Because an entrepreneur is an extraordinarily lonely, scary, mostly miserable profession where you fail 90% of the time. I mean, I was Harley. Like, we had the same story. Like, I had a beauty box company that failed. I had a Grubhub competitor that failed. I had like half of these things that we had a scheduling company. I remember an investor told me never to build scheduling software because he said it's crazy and you have to convert it to every single time zone. And I was like, I think it'll be fine. It's like 2010. I can figure this out. Worst idea I've ever had. Spent 2.5 years building scheduling software. Made sense because we were in the daily deal space. But that means that on a day-to-day basis, mostly things are blowing up. Mostly things are not going well. Mostly you're like, there's no way I can make this work. You're bright enough to know that it isn't working. And the best investors are the people who are like, it's supposed to feel like that, keep going, you got this one thing, and that's what allows you, like, every entrepreneur I know has the same story, and it's just about, can you fight through that grit? And so it's partially about, more of us publicly talking about our failures. I mean, American CEOs are like awesome at talking about their epic $100 million failure. I don't hear any Canadian CEOs talking about that.
There's a few.
And then having, the best investors are the one that just told me, just keep going, you're gonna get to the next stage. And they just reminded me of all of the times in every single one of their portfolio companies that were the same, if not worse, than the situation I was in at that moment.
That's really helpful. Harley, I'm going to bring it back to you for a second. You talked about this document you shared with 12 other CEOs when you were going public. Can you tell us a little bit about the success of your IPO?
So far, the stock's doing pretty good, so happy about that. I think when we initially decided to go public for a couple reasons, but mostly it was around the company was ready, we thought the product was ready, we thought we had the team in place. So we just thought Shopify was ready to go public. And it was important for us to do a dual listing, both in New York Stock Exchange and on the TSX, because again, we are a proud Canadian company, but most of our float, just in terms of the stock market working with capital markets, we also needed to be a US stock. When we looked around and tried to find mentors and advisors to help us through the process, we kept hearing about the same two companies, which was Nortel and BlackBerry. And those are not companies we really wanted to emulate. And frankly, I know the executives and the founders of those companies, and they are inspiring. What they have built, both those companies, is amazing. But unfortunately, there wasn't that many other role models to ask, okay, how does this work? Dual class shares. Who do I use as an underwriter? Does it make sense to go TSX and go NYSE, or should I just do one or the other? It was very difficult, and so we did what we always do. We got to work. We started researching. We tried to find anyone that had any insight to tell us about how to take this company public. And as we were sort of going through it, we realized that there just wasn't that many great other examples, and there wasn't that many role models. There weren't people that had been there, done that before, and so. I think we went public on May 24th, May 23rd, 2015. I think by the 28th, we were on a hangout with 8 or 12 different Canadian CEOs, and we're like, look, you guys don't have to go public, but if you do, and we'd love you to go public because we think it's a great Canadian story, here are the things that we learned along the way, and here are some of the mistakes we make that you should not make. And there was nothing that was, there was nothing that was private or confidential. We gave them the entire playbook of how Shopify went public. And what's been amazing through that, and unfortunately none of them have actually gone public yet, which, it's getting a little lonely here. What's amazing about that is when I tell that story in Canadian circles, they're like, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for doing that. And when I do a keynote or I speak at a US conference, they're like, why would you do that? It's like, you're giving your playbook away to people that potentially are competing with you for market share from the investment community. And I don't believe that. I think maybe it's because there's fewer of us here in Canada as a population, as entrepreneurs, but I love the fact that we stick together. I love the fact that we help each other. But it was a great process for us. We didn't just want to be a public company, we want to be a proud public company, and that's hopefully where we're going 6 quarters later. But it was a great experience for us, and I want to see more of that. I remember a story like years ago, probably 2012 or something. There was a rumor, it wasn't true, but there was a rumor that Google was going to purchase Shopify. And I remember a bunch of engineers coming into my office and saying, what's the story here? Is it true? And I looked at them and I said, it's not true, it's not happening. But I'd like you guys to start thinking about the idea of Shopify buying Google one day. And they're like, what?
That's what we need
Right?
to change in this
I was like,
country.
yeah, what if Shopify one day buys Google, right? And it broke their brain. They couldn't fathom that idea. And by the way, we're not at a point yet. I think their market cap is like 100x what ours is, so we can't afford to buy Google yet.
2 years.
But I would say that the fact that they were so dumbfounded by that concept frustrated me, because that's the way I think about things, and certainly that's the way Toby thinks about things. So I think we just need maybe more of that. I don't know if it's chutzpah or it's audacity or it's, I don't know what it is, but that's really the way I think about our business and Canadian economy.
And that, I mean, that leads us to the conversation about talent. So you talked about how with this new immigration policy, you'll be able to get more talent in Canada. I want to ask you, Jacques, what do you think about that? I think that...
Well, it's a major challenge. It's been a major challenge. And you can split the talent in different areas. So engineering talent, scientists, we don't really need people. You always need people, but there's not a lack of good engineers, good scientists here. We have got great universities, no problem with that one. Where we're lacking expertise to grow the company are on the management side. And on the management side, it's mainly on the sales side. Company is based on what it sells. And so we need to have that kind of people coming in. And it's very difficult. We've tried, us or through our funds or entrepreneurs we know, it's always a tricky process to do culturally to attract people. One of the good examples I would take is the Israel model. Start a company in Tel Aviv, you do the R&D in Tel Aviv, the same day you open a new Delaware company, you open an office for sales office in San Francisco, and there you go.
Do you think Canada should emulate that model?
In some cases, it works. An example of that is a Quebec company a few years ago called Taleo, recruit staff that changed for Taleo. Their story, Quebec-based, 10 people, start a company, open the R&D office in Quebec City, open an office of sales in San Francisco. Over a few years, they became the company in that sector, in HR. They went public, the same route, and then they got sold to Oracle for $1.9 billion a few years later. That's one of the great ways to do it, but there's other way where you can attract talent. And when you're beginning to be big, as Shopify is now getting, it's much easier to attract the talent that you need.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think so we have 5 offices, Montreal, Ottawa, Waterloo, Toronto, and our newest office is San Francisco. So we just opened our first US office, and it was because we acquired a company in San Francisco called Kit. About a year and a half ago, we were looking for a head of data, a senior vice president for data at Shopify. And we started looking at, we have a great talent team that does this talent acquisition and does the research on who are the best people. And there was this guy named David Lenny who was running data at Netflix in San Francisco. And he was a Chicago guy, and he moved to San Francisco. And as we started talking about this guy, David, like this guy is the man. He gets it, he understands it. And we were like, yeah, let's get him, obviously. Let's get him to Ottawa. Let's move him and his partner to Ottawa. And as we started to talk about this, you can sort of see that people are like, well, he's in San Francisco. Is he really going to want to move to Ottawa, Canada? Like, of course he will. Like, this is a great company. This is an amazing city. And we were just, we assumed, of course, he'd want to come and move here. And he did. He moved here a year and a half ago. We then were looking for an SVP of technology, and we heard about this guy, JML, out of Australia from a company called Atlassian. Same sort of thing. People are like, well, are you sure they're going to move? Of course they're going to move. If you have the right opportunity, Canada is an amazing place to move to. I know, bringing him here in the middle of February, I get it. It's not nearly as nice as it is in San Francisco.
Not a good recruiting trick.
There's 3 weeks where it's really rough. Other than that, this is an amazing place. And so I want to raise the level of ambition about our talent and bring in the best people. Don't hire the best person that you can get or that you think you can get. Hire the best person in the world. And I think if it's the right opportunity, they absolutely will move to Ottawa in the dead of winter.
Well, Michele, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I wouldn't recruit in February.
No, but do you think that as a startup, I mean, it's equally encouraging
People are looking for when you are the best person at data in the world or the best person at business development, it doesn't matter. You're looking for the best companies in the world. And if those companies are here, you're going to come. And so it's our job as entrepreneurs to build those incredible companies, and I believe that you can do it. Do we have enough of those? No. We have to build a lot more. I mean, when Harley says he's lonely as a public tech company, like, bells should go off. That's a concern. Like, we have to build more of these, and we have to get more companies to the stage. Right?
So thank you so much. I want to be able to open up the panel for questions if there's somebody who, is there a mic that's going around?
Mic stands are.
No questions. No?
They're coming.
Oh.
They're coming.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead. Can you please be brief, give your name, because we only have a few minutes. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. My name is Joanne Castonguay, and I work for the Institute of Research for Public Policy. I see this as a public policy forum. We talked a little bit about government sustaining or helping, promoting innovation and helping entrepreneurs developing themselves. I see that the federal government is changing a lot, and there's been a lot of movement towards encouraging innovation. I also see that there's 40% of GDP that comes from government expenses. 16% of those comes from in the province of Quebec anyway, comes from the federal government, and the rest from the provincial and municipal government. What do you expect, or do you think that you're getting the appropriate support from the provincial government? And what kind of collaboration could we see or expect from both levels of government in order to foster better innovation?
Before you answer the question, I'm just going to have the next person ask their question so we'll take 3 questions, and then we're unfortunately out of time.
We have to remember these questions? Is that?
Yes.
Mine's really easy. My name is Leo Doyle, and yesterday at noon, I had the privilege of being at the awards ceremony at Lisgar High School, which you can see, I think, probably from Harley's building, and it was amazing. These kids, the top award winners, and there were like hundreds of them, and many of them, when they leave Lisgar High School, may not be coming back to Ottawa unless they had someone really inspiring who came and spoke to them. Are you accepting invitations, Harley?
I mean, that takes a great deal of chutzpah, so I have to say yes to that. So, good for you.
And one more question, and then I'll let the panel, so we'll have 3. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Of course, we are doing Canada 2020. And as I heard Harley and Jacques, I see them really not talking Canada 2020, but they are talking Planet 2020. And I think maybe next year's conference could be called Planet 2020. I just had a proposal.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So if you want to...
I don't think we have permission to change the title of the conference.
No, but you...
I think like Harley 2020 sounds pretty good too, but yeah.
We can suggest...
So, okay, that's it. No
One
more
short question. My name is Devashish Paul. I run strategic marketing for a top 20 semiconductor company based out of San Jose, and I run it out of here in Ottawa. And one thing that I find the culture in our company is everyone from Bangalore to Shanghai to Austin to Stockholm can take our job. Basically, any group of smart guys with a set of computers and some level of organizations and innovations can beat us. So every day, guys come to work with this notion that we got to be number 1 or number 2 in the world. Coming back to the soccer team, it's not good enough just to show up and play. You got to win, and you got to be number 1 or number 2. And your example of the guys, flabbergasted by the concept of buying Google, it plays exactly into that. So you guys talked about at the finance and the venture capital level, but I think there's a fundamental shift in terms of the engineering and business talent that are in our companies, and these guys need to start thinking that we don't count we don't count medals, we don't count 4th and 5th, we don't count silver and bronze, we just cover gold. And I think the companies in Ottawa and Canada who have been successful, they've fostered this down to the co-op student coming into work, you're coming into work here to be number one in the world. And what are your challenges that you find in your companies getting people into this mindset? Because very un-Canadian. And our teams are spread over Ottawa, Austin, Tempe, San Jose, over in Germany, and it's all about, how are we going to be number one or number two in the world if we can't cut that business line and rebalance and reinvest into something else?
Thank you.
Sorry, it was a bit long, but...
That's okay. You want to start with the government support, and then you can go into the...
So, to Mrs. Castonguay's question on the provincial intervention or what they can do, Quebec is the best example of this. 12 years ago, they realized that the environment for the entrepreneurs, for funding entrepreneurs, was not right, and we had to change the whole landscape. And they committed a whole lot of money with their partners, being the Solidarity Fund, FTQ, labor sponsor fund that was getting tax credits from the federal and the provincial, and a pension fund, the largest pension fund, the Caisse de dépôt. With this, they realized that they could not build an ecosystem locally in itself, that it needed to be not the best fund in Montreal, but the best fund located in Montreal in Canada, best fund in North America. So with this, what was started was to have relationships started between all of the investors throughout Canada to make sure that we would raise the bar. That was 10 years ago, to raise the bar of everyone, and that's what we're seeing. So the relationship between the provincial and federal, in our case, has been working beautifully.
Great. Do you guys want to speak to the talent mindset question?
I thought your point was great, and it's exactly what Harley talks about when he talks about, can we buy Google, as opposed to thinking of it the other way around. And that's really, it's an internal leadership problem, and it's a Canadian cultural problem. Like, I have to come to work every day and remind everyone on my team that we're not playing startup. We're not looking to be, on the best panel in Canada. We're looking to be the global player in doing something and change the way. And we have to start, small. But it's the biggest challenge. Is you can't be complacent, because there's every other country in the world wakes up every morning and they say, we want to beat the U.S. too, and we want to beat Canada. And if you're not on your game, we're going to continue to struggle.
So the thing that I loathe most in the entire world, not just in business, but in restaurants and hotels and everything in my life, is mediocrity. I loathe mediocrity, and I call it out whenever I see it. And so first and foremost, to this gentleman's point, I think we should be unapologetic about our ambition. Some people may think that I'm a little bit of a bull in a china shop. That's fine. I want to win. I also think it's really important that every single person that works for us, we take the time to understand what motivates them. Not everyone is motivated by market cap or stock valuation or money. Some people are motivated by doing the best research in the world. Some people are motivated by solving very complicated problems that they didn't think they can solve initially. So I think it's really important when you look at your company, specifically those that are based here in Canada, it's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of ambition. Figure out what each group, each person needs to feel like that they want to be number one. Because I don't think any of us are here for second place.
Love the way you're ending this. So we've learned a lot today, but I think some of the key themes is the fact that we need to change our mindset. We need to be more collaborative. We have to have more chutzpah, collaborative with government, with business, with education. We at Canada 2020 are launching an entrepreneurship commission to really answer a lot of these questions, and we'll be telling you more about that. And please join me in thanking Jacques and Harley and Michele. We really need more people like this.
Thanks.